welcome to the channel, and here we will talk about all things football. For my friends in the United States, it's all things soccer, but whether you call it football or soccer, this is where we will talk about the game. This is where we will look at some of the things happening in our game, the game we all love, and this is where we will have good discussions. If you are not a football fan, if you are not a real football fan, a fan of the game, not just a fan of your club, but a fan of the game, a lover of the game, this may not be the place for you. Yes, we will have a rant now and then, but this is really a space for fans of the game, those of us who want to see the game grow, those of us who want to see the game remain beautiful. So if that's you, then this is the place. We will be looking in this video at our Champions League. The Champions League has expanded for next season. They are using a new format, and they have also added an option where leagues have been granted additional slots in the group stages based on the performance of their teams in this year's version of the Champions League. So we will be looking at that. We'll also be looking at some of the teams that have qualified for the Champions League next season, and additionally we will be looking at some of the perennial teams that have failed to qualify for the Champions League for next season. In fact, some of these teams are out of Europe altogether. So this is what we'll be doing, and over the next couple of minutes we'll just take a little bit of time to just run through and to see what's going to be happening in the Champions League come next season. Alright, so we will start with Serie A. The Italians have had a very good Champions League this year. Italian clubs performed very well, and as a consequence of that, Serie A has been awarded 5 group stage spots in the Champions League for next season, and those 5 spots are going to be taken by Inter, the Serie A champions, AC Milan, Juventus, Bologna, and Atalanta. Bologna being the surprise package here. Bologna is a small club. They have never played in the Champions League before, but they have done exceedingly well in Serie A this season, and under Thiago Motta they have been a model of consistency. They have stayed true to their game, they have played well, and they have stayed consistent, and they are being rewarded with a place in the Champions League next season, which they have so earned. Whether or not we see their coach Thiago Motta with them in the Champions League next season is still to be seen, because Juventus have sacked Allegri, and their number one target to replace him is Thiago Motta. So we will have to see if Thiago Motta appears on the bench for either Bologna or Juventus in next season's Champions League. Let's hope that Bologna are able to keep hold of him, and they will have their coach for next season in their inaugural Champions League quest. One team, though, that will not have to worry about their coach as we switch over to the Germans, as the Bundesliga also has 5 slots in the Champions League group stages for next season because of the performance of their teams in this season's competition, with Dortmund playing in the final in a couple of weeks' time, is Bayer Leverkusen. Bayer Leverkusen don't have to worry about their coach. Xabi Alonso has already made it clear that he is staying at Leverkusen, so he will definitely be with them in their Champions League campaign next season. And speaking of Leverkusen, they have had a season to remember. They can immortalize themselves over the next 2 games they have. If they take the Europa Cup and the DFB Pokal, they will be immortal. But they'll be joined out of Germany in next season's Champions League by Dortmund, RB Leipzig, Bayern Munich, and Stuttgart. Stuttgart is another surprise team. Nobody expected Stuttgart to get this far this quickly, as Stuttgart only came back into the Bundesliga from Bundesliga 2 in 2020. So Stuttgart has also done pretty well this season, and they have earned their way into the Champions League for next season. As we step over to France, PSG are perennial Champions League, contenders. Yeah, contenders. But they will be Mbappe-less. For the first time in 7 years, they'll be embarking on a campaign without Kylian Mbappe. Let's see how that affects them. Could make them better, could make them worse. We will just have to see. But they'll be joined in the Champions League by Monaco. And they will also be joined in the group stages by Brest. Brest is a very small club. Brest is the surprise package here. Brest will have the challenge of probably not being able to play their home Champions League games at their own stadium because their stadium is so small. And so it is not UEFA qualified. And as a result, they may end up having to play their home matches at a larger stadium. Brest Stadium's capacity is about 16,000. So, but I'm sure their fans will travel with them wherever it is that they'll end up playing their home games. I'm sure their fans will travel with them. I'm sure their fans will support them. First time ever in the Champions League. And Brest and their fans are going to have a ball next season. As we step over to Spain, Spain is also having a fairy tale team. La Liga has produced a fairy tale team this season as well, who will be also making their first appearance in the Champions League come next season, and that is Girona. Girona only got promoted to La Liga in 2022. So they have, after 2 years in La Liga, they have made it to the Champions League. Girona has also been a consistent team this season. They have never dropped out of the top 4 in La Liga for the entire season, and we will have to see how they perform in the Champions League next season. And a caveat here for Girona though, Girona is owned by that City group, so they are not exactly a poor team. Their owners are the same group that owns Manchester City and quite a few other clubs in Europe and the United States. So Girona has been able to access quite a few players from Manchester City on loan, and they have been able to put together a quality team since they have moved up to La Liga. They have been able to field pretty decent teams because of those loan players, and they have also been able to attract a few quality players outside of the loans, and it has paid off this season. They have been consistent, they have played good football, and they are going to be in the Champions League next season, and let's hope that they can move from strength to strength. We want to see them playing very good. We want to see them producing the same quality of football they have produced this season, and hopefully they'll have a good Champions League run. When teams like Girona and Bologna and Brest and those teams play well on the European stage, it is only good for the game. It is never good to see the small teams being battered by the giants of the game all the time. We want to have those competitive games. We want to have the upsets. We want to see the underdogs overcome sometimes. That is the beauty of football. That is why we love the game. That is why we watch the game. It's why we play the game. And it's why the game means what it means to us. So Girona will be in the Champions League group stages next season, and they will be joined by Real Madrid, Barcelona and Atletico Madrid. Sticking to the Iberian Peninsula, we move over to Portugal, and Sporting, as Portuguese champions, will automatically qualify for the group stage, but Benfica can also qualify through the qualifying rounds as second place finishers there. One team that will be missing, however, is Porto. Porto, perennial Portuguese champions, perennial Champions League contenders, are not going to be appearing in next season's Champions League because they have finished outside the top 2 in Portugal. So Porto will have some questions to answer over the off-season as to the direction that club goes in if they are to return to the Champions League. But they will not be in the Champions League, and Portugal will be represented by Sporting and possibly Benfica. Another big team that is going to be out of the Champions League is Ajax from Holland. Ajax ended up finishing 5th in the Eredivisie this season. That is unheard of, So Ajax is going to be missing out on Champions League football. They'll still have an opportunity to qualify for the Europa League if they can make it through the Europa League qualifying rounds. But Ajax, who have always produced really good teams and have always represented themselves well in Europe will be out of the Champions League. I think their policy of selling, as you know, Ajax is a selling club. They produce really great young players and then they tend to sell them off for big money to the larger European clubs. You look at players such as Anthony at Manchester United, Martinez at Manchester United, De Ligt, Frankie de Jong. These are all players who have come through at Ajax and have been sold off for big money. And it seems to have caught up with them now. They're over the last 2 seasons. They have not performed well. In fact, their last title was 2 years ago under Ten Hag. And they have had a pretty dismal season this season. At one point, they were in the relegation zone. So Ajax will have a lot of questions to answer this off-season about how their structure is set up, managerial questions with their playing staff, and if they can continue along that path of selling off their best players. Hopefully they'll find the answers. Ajax, we like to see them play, we like to see their brand of football, and hopefully they can find the answers. But while they are out, PSV, the Dutch champions, and Feyenoord, last year's champions, will both be heading to the group stages of the Champions League. And we expect them to also perform well. Feyenoord will be heading to the Champions League for the second straight season, but they will be heading there without their coach, because their coach, Arne Slot, is moving over to take over from Klopp at Liverpool. So Slot will be in the Champions League, but he'll be on a different bench in next year's competition. But let's hope Feyenoord can overcome. They have this year's experience, so they should be able to represent themselves well in next year's tournament. So we look and we wait to see what will happen with those teams and how well they will perform. But as we switch over to the Premier League is also fielding a team for the Champions League that has not been in the Champions League for a very long time. Aston Villa has made it to next year's Champions League, and this will be their first time in Champions League football for 40 years. You know, Villa has done exceedingly well under Unai Emery. He has turned them around in the space of a year and a half, and they have played exceedingly good football. They have been consistent, and Emery has done wonders with them, and hopefully they can perform at the same level next year and represent themselves well. I know their fans will be ecstatic with Champions League football. They were in Europe this year as well, and they made a deep run in Europe. And to have made that deep run in Europe along with staying consistent in the Premier League, kudos to them, kudos to Emery and his man management. For me, he is the manager of the year in the Premier League, to have done what he did with Villa, with his budget and with the playing squad that he had. He really did a fantastic job. And so we have to take our hats off to him. But Villa will be joined by Liverpool, Man City and Arsenal. They'll all be heading off to the group stages. Hopefully the English teams can represent themselves better next year. You know, they did not do too well this year, but so let's hope that next year they can make a better representation for themselves. But as we wrap up that section, let us look at some of the teams from the Premier League that have not made the Champions League. Chelsea and Manchester United stand out. These are perennial Champions League teams. People expect to see these teams in the Champions League. But both teams are going through a moment. Manchester United's moment seems to have been a very long moment. It's over 10 years. They are going through a 10-year moment. But they need to get their house in order. That is easier said than done. We do not know who their coach is going to be. Ten Hag could be gone by June, and we don't know what is going to happen there. I don't think the players know, the fans don't know, and probably even the club management don't know what they are going to do in terms of the managerial position. You know, so they need to sort that out. The playing squad needs to be sorted out. That playing squad is not fit for purpose. That playing squad cannot win the Premier League. That playing squad cannot compete effectively in the Champions League. And we saw that this season. They were just simply not good enough. Players there looked lazy, they looked disinterested a lot of the times, and the quality is just not what it ought to be at a club the status of Manchester United. Manchester United is a big club in name only at this point, because as it relates to on the field performance, they are far from being a big club. They are living off the Manchester United name of the past at this point in time. But what will they do? What are they going to do with the managerial position? What are they going to do with this playing squad? That first team needs a significant overhaul if they are going to perform at the levels that they are expected to perform at. They need at least 5 new players for the first team. But in order to get those players in, they will have to sell players. And that is going to be a challenge, because they are paying some of the highest salaries in Europe, and a lot of those players will not be able to make those salaries at any other club. No other club is going to offer them those salaries, and as such, they're going to be stuck with those players. And with financial fair play looming over them, without selling players, they're not going to be able to purchase the players that they need. So they could be stuck in this situation for another couple of years until some of those contracts run down. You see, and what of the managerial position? Is Ten Hag going to be there? Are they going to let him go? And if they do let him go, who are they going to get? You know, at this point in time, you do have a couple of managers who are out there now. Allegri's available, Thomas Tuchel is available, Roberto De Zerbi is now available, Hansi Flick is still available. But what of the managerial position? If you take Tuchel is going to be a problem. Tuchel wants control of the playing squad. He wants to determine transfers. It's why he fell out with Chelsea, and it is also why his relationship with Bayern is ending, because he wants to have total control and he wants the support of the club managers to have total control. And since Sir Alex has left Manchester United, no manager there has had total control. Tuchel is not going to be fit for that Manchester United job under the current regime that they currently have. Their manager is, in a lot of ways, powerless. You know, there are footballing decisions being made by people who are not involved with football. So Tuchel is not necessarily going to be a fit there. I don't think he will take the job even if it's offered to him, and under the conditions that it would be offered to him. So then what? We look at Allegri. Allegri may not want to come to the Premier League. It's outside of Italy. He has not left Italy. He has been at Juventus for basically all of his senior coaching career of merit. And so he might not see the Premier League as a transition he wants to make at this stage, probably a year from now, but definitely he probably wouldn't want to make that step right now. And so you could cross Allegri off the list, but a lot of Manchester United fans and even people within the club have been fans of Roberto De Zerbi for quite a while. They like that De Zerbi ball. They want to see that De Zerbi ball come to Old Trafford. But while that might be the case, we don't know what the terms of De Zerbi's separation from Brighton are. And it could be that they have included in that separation agreement that he does not take up another job in the Premier League for the upcoming season. That is entirely possible. We don't know. But also, let's look at De Zerbi on the field. We saw what happened this season with him at Brighton. His team was ravaged by injuries. He lost important players early in the season. Solly Marsh, Mitoma, Estupian, all of these players went down, and it affected the way Brighton played. It was obvious he could not play the football he wanted because he did not have the players he wanted. And so you did not see that De Zerbi ball so much this season as in the previous season. and if you are going to take the Zerbi to Old Trafford, you're going to have to get him the players to play the style of play that he is interested in playing. And at current, the Manchester United squad that is there now is not fit for purpose as it relates to how the Zerbi would want to play. So you're going to have to get him players, and as previously stated, that might be a challenge for next season. So let us see how that pans out. I think their best option may be to stick with Ten Hag. People are concerned about Ten Hag's style of play. A lot of folks don't like the way Ten Hag's team play. They look rudderless a lot of the times. But Ten Hag is straddling his natural inclination against what it is that is expected of him at Manchester United. We may not remember that in Ten Hag's last season at Ajax, even though Ajax won the title, a lot of their games ended 1-0 and 2-0. They were not a free-flowing, high-scoring team. They were a team that was solid in the middle, tight at the back. They would score and then they would hold what they had. That's Ten Hag's natural inclination. He has not been able to do that at Manchester United because he has not had the players to do it. It's one of the reasons why he was so desperate in his first season to get Frankie de Jong, because that's how they would have ended up playing had he been able to get de Jong. But that never happened, and so he has not been able to play his own style, which is really in contravention to the Manchester United way, the Sir Alex way, that swashbuckling attacking football that Manchester United fans have become accustomed to. So you have to look at, is it going to be a case where they are going to try to get a coach who can play that? But if you're going to try to get a coach who can play that swashbuckling football that we also love to see, then you will need the players who can do it. And at current, the Manchester United squad, as is now, cannot do that. They just cannot do that. So let's see what happens with them, and hopefully they will start to move in the right direction next season. But for this season, they are a small team with a big name, and that's just the simple truth. As we switch over to Chelsea, they have underperformed. They have spent all this money over the past 3 transfer windows. They have changed their coach. I think Pochettino didn't do very well. I think it took him a while to settle in, and for a coach who has already coached in the Premier League, that is not acceptable. Pochettino didn't do well, in my opinion. His team lacked focus. They lacked a system. They were just there, and a lot of the times it was almost like watching Chelsea was almost like watching a pickup game. You didn't know what you were going to get. And when they were good, they were very, very good. And when they were bad, they were horrid. And if it wasn't for Cole Palmer, I think they would have finished way down the league. Cole Palmer really, really proved his worth. He was one of the cheaper transfers that they did over the last couple of transfer windows, but he has proven to be the best transfer that they have done in this time. So Chelsea will need, they will need to look at their managerial position as well, and they will also need to look at their playing squad. Their playing squad is imbalanced. There are players there who clearly are not happy, and they will also need to focus on what it is that their playing squad is going to produce, and if they are going to need to revisit that managerial position, or if they are going to allow Pochettino to have another season to see if he can turn things around there. But Chelsea and Manchester United are both going to be missing out on that Champions League. They may both still be able to play in Europe. Chelsea will definitely be trying to make that Europa Conference League count. They are already in it. Manchester United can get into the Europa League. If they beat Manchester City in the FA Cup, they will qualify for the Europa League through that avenue. However, if Manchester City beats Manchester United in the FA Cup, then Chelsea will be able to to move up to the Europa League from the Europa Conference League. So Chelsea will definitely be in Europe. But Manchester United's only hope of being in Europe for next season is if they beat Manchester City in the FA Cup finals, and that is going to be a very tall order. But it's a one-off game and anything can happen, and it's why we watch the games, it's why the games are played, it's why we love the game. Glorious uncertainty. So as we wrap up here, I thank you for staying with me throughout the video, and hopefully we will see each other again in the very near future. Have a good one.